Welcome to Shamanic Voices, a profound journey into the heart of shamanism, led by a seasoned practitioner with over 40 years of experience and his journeymen. Join us as we learn how this ancient wisdom can help you navigate your modern life. I'm Bryan Nolan, your host, a journeyman Tietia, and with me now is your co-host, Georg Breckman, a shaman Tietia. Georg, how are you doing today?
Very good. Good morning, Bryan.
Good morning.
Good to get with you on this.
Hey, I think we have a fantastic topic lined up today. We want to talk about the individual versus the communal well-being.
The collective versus the individual. Yes.
Exactly. And I find it very fascinating that I started having some things come in last night while I was out at a concert going to see this great band Mo, and I realized it was actually my first time seeing a show sober back in my days. And I had this great idea to talk about a topic that was kind of coming in through this whole week about the association theory. And this morning, me and you were chatting, and your topic that came into you had exactly intertwined with what I was doing. So it's one of those things where you kind of you look at it, kind of happens for a reason, you know?
Well, I do follow the idea that synchronicities occur with some higher intentionality than that which we as humans have.
Yeah.
Definitely in the realm of the Sisters of Fate, to be sure.
Absolutely. Sometimes when those synchronicities line up, you can't just excuse them as just sheer coincidence.
Right you are.
So where would you like to start with this? I mean, this topic branches all over the place.
Well, I think it's fascinating to back up the idea. You're going to a rock concert, so we've probably got most of our audience on tenterhooks trying to find out what comes next right there. So do go on.
So not to go too deep into it, but basically I went to this rock concert and it was absolutely fantastic. And I had a love for this band back from early 2008, 2009. Mo, M-O-E period is their name. But back then I was an addict. I associated music with drugs constantly. I didn't know how to unassociate them because it's what gave me joy at the time. But I'll never forget my first Mo show because I had gone there with my ex, who sadly had passed away from an overdose at 19, and her whole group of friends. And this was the first time I had gone to a concert around, I use this term loosely, but responsible drug addicts who were not trying to get as high as possible. They were just having a good time. No one was falling over except me. I was the one who went too far and caused some issues. But that association was very interesting. And I started thinking about this at that show. And literally during this show, I started kind of remembering about how I had blamed myself for her death for a long time because I had associated the fact that I had done some drugs with her and I had introduced her to maybe a couple of people that may have contributed to her heroin use, that it was my fault for this. And I realized I never actually worked to depotentiate that from myself. I deep down knew I didn't blame myself, but I needed to understand why I didn't blame myself. And I realized that, right, at that time, I could not process what that meant. I couldn't process that, sure, I may have encountered this and introduced them to stuff, but they had their own accountability and actions afterwards. And it's just, it faded away. It's something it wasn't eating at me, it wasn't destroying me or anything like that, but it made me also unassociate this band with trauma, with any sort of thing. And that's right, that's not really trauma, that's more about unresolved associations.
Right.
Which I think is a good thing for us to recodify, because we talk about the big T and little t trauma in the public now. And really, I mean, me and you discuss this all the time. Trauma is something that scars your soul.
Yeah. Whereas using the little t trauma to describe any time you didn't get your way, I didn't get my way, it's like an infant crying out for attention. It's also just a way of, it's just a manifestation of narcissism, self-importance. Well, these military veterans, they can't have all the capital T trauma. I'm going to have my trauma too, because my boyfriend didn't spend enough money on me and he didn't treat me like a lady. Well, I'm sorry, lady, that's not trauma. It's unfortunate you got the wrong guy, but I feel sorry for you there. But hey, that's an unresolved issue on your part and maybe his It's not trauma.
Well, you know what I think happens often, and I see this, and with my generation and the one after, is when you try to tell someone, no, that's not trauma what you dealt with. It's almost like saying they hear, and not that you're saying this, but they hear that you are dismissing that this doesn't matter and they're just overreacting. No, you're allowed to have unresolved associations, but let's recodify that's not trauma. It still impacts you. An unresolved association that you know where it comes from is much easier to depotentiate than a scar on your soul. Now, the goal
for sure. But let's look at why these things appear to be so attractive in the first place. This gets back to a wonderful article that was published, I believe, in the American Journal of Psychoanalysis by a Dr. Howard Stein, Stein, as I recall, back in the 70s. I have a weird memory for articles, clinical articles I read for some crazy reason. I don't know why they just stick to me more than something entertaining would. And it was called simply The Power of the Victim. And everyone wants to associate, well, I'm more of a victim than you are. I'm a better victim than you are. I'm going to look at, but I'm 1/25th Cherokee, so therefore I'm a victim for American Indian discrimination. Despite the fact I've never been treated that way, or even identified that way, but I'm going to imagine myself to be this victimized character so I can get social credit from you. I can get attention from you. I can harvest loosh from you and potentially treat you as my oppressor if I don't get my way with you. It's a very manipulative stance, really, to try to cast yourself as a victim when you're not. So that's where trying to play yourself as being traumatized when it's not really trauma is a way of being that victim. So you then collect victim points, victim status, and victim compensation from whoever you're trying to latch onto and parasitize with this rap that you're putting out there.
And as you mentioned, just to bring up one point, when you mentioned the manipulation, the most dangerous type of manipulation is when someone doesn't know that they're manipulating you, when they're taught from a young age. And that's the good thing to separate too. There's the malicious one where you know what you're doing, the compulsive liar who actively knows what they're doing versus the pathological liar who has no idea they're lying. Same concept.
But it's just ingrained, yeah.
Yeah, so when you're taught from a young age that this is how you are and this is right or righteous is the classic word nowadays, you don't realize that you are acting like a victim. And if it's like a cult programming, well, it is a cult programming, where, just to be frank, it is, where you're taught from a young age, if anyone goes against this or calls you on what it is, or like, hey, suggests it, and you get defensive. If you get defensive about anything that someone says, generally or broad, and you feel like it's attacking you, question that. You should question why this feels like an attack on you when no one was talking to you directly. That's a program that you were being hit.
Good point. So you ran into this situation at the concert. It brought some things up.
Yeah, in a very positive way. And it was interesting. And I refer to myself as California sober. I like to have a little bit of pot every now and then, just for more of a meditative purpose. Have a couple beers when I go out. I don't like.
And just for the sake of our audience, it's perfectly legal where you are there in New Jersey.
Yes.
There's no stigma associated with using pot socially, just like we'd use a beer in the South socially.
Yeah.
No issue. Just
that's
to
a
make
good thing
clear.
to point out. And for anyone listening.
So we're not advocating that anybody in states where it's not legal cross that line. Good idea
Very
not
true.
to cross that line. Yeah.
But it's that healthy where you're not scared of yourself for it. So doing that at the show allowed me to actually unassociate certain things with it and just really get in the groove. And what was very cool was when that was the opening band going on, where I had this kind of come out. When the actual band came on, Mo, I was stone cold sober. Everything wore off. And I was like, this is the best thing that could have happened. Yes. First show completely sober. I just kind of had the urge to get into it. And it kind of allowed me to just shed that ego from myself and look at it with a clear frame of mind. And it was a really nice thing to experience, to have that go on. It sparked some great conversations with me and my wife. I mean, on our way in there, we encountered a guy that I care about a lot. Not going to go into details, but see him spiraling down, getting worse and worse and worse. And, when you're a certain age, it's It's not cute anymore. It's not cute.
Yeah.
And this like completely deregulated things at first. And as we walked in the concert, there's dysregulation and whatnot. And we passed this one table at the beginning. And it's called Sober Moms from Mo. And it's a group of people that go to these shows sober. They used to get messed up, but they really love the music. They unassociate the drugs and the music. And they just found solace there. Introduced, talked to them a little bit, just said hi. Kind of, as I walked past the table, I got this intuition of talk to her. Okay, cool. And on talking to her, it allowed my wife just to feel so much calmer. Because at first, being overwhelmed by that, because she does not associate that stuff together. She loves music for music. And it was amazing to see that quick flip that can happen when you unassociate it from the event.
Sure. And from the fear of falling into that endless dark hole of addiction. Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's quite promising that such groups like that exist where they're going to enjoy it. An interesting thing is that the 4/4 Orphic rhythm of rock music exactly has its own value for entrainment. This is actually brought up in a wonderful book, The Committee of 300, about the 300 ruling families or organizations of the world by Dr. John Coleman, Coleman, that came out in I want to say 1989 or 1988, somewhere like that. Perhaps a little bit out of date now, but it was quite good at the time.
You mentioned that to me. I still have to read that book. One of the 300 I have on my list for you.
Oh, you don't have to read them on my behalf. I'm just putting them out there as a resource.
No, it's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it was it was a good show. It was good to experience that. And to go back to the topic of what this episode is about, the reason I like that band, and I think everyone who has ventured through, their early teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and hopefully got their shit together at some point, has seen that progression of their life and the people around them. And this is a band where you have your communities that go together. You have family. You have kids at this show hanging out, having a blast. Little kids. And when you go to their events, those guys all hang out together. The families, the family camping, all that stuff. The people who are not the family stuff, but again, California sober. They may hang out together, having a couple beers, just chilling. And then the people who get messed up, they hang out together. But they respect it and they stay away from everyone else. And it's this nice kind of community within the music scene. And I mean, I witnessed it last night while I was there. And I saw some things hanging out at that crowd, and they were kind of trying to feed on addicts, trying to attach them. The things we talk about in the background, the insectoids and the reptilians, that's a prime thing to feed on. That person who is struggling or trying to get their life on track. They're at that crux point of the bipolar, identity disorder, and living between two worlds. And sometimes you go to these places, and that community is what pulls you away from that.
Well, BBC did a wonderful series on Dr. Joseph Campbell's works in which he tried to dissect what's going on with religion. Very interesting. And they expanded the view of religion to beyond just what we think about with the velvet-covered brick and the hush of the pews and the organ in the middle and the stained glass windows and all that other stuff, all of which is supposed to be consciousness modifying, of course. And they actually showed a soccer game as an example. A rock concert would be another example, where you're undergoing a communal experience of mind alteration with frequencies doing it instead. And
That's a good point.
The
Yeah.
roar of the crowd doing it instead. Mass psychosis, the zeitgeist of the crowd, the collective consciousness of the crowd is part of what you're experiencing. So yes, you indeed did have a lawful and socially acceptable version of a mind-altering experience, you see, with or without any substance whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that.
It's a form of religion, really. The rock concert is a mass, just like a Latin mass.
Oh.
Only the stadium is the cathedral, you see.
Well, that posits an interesting thing that came up. One of the people that we met before going in, he was, again, beyond inebriated before going in. But he's like, oh, I've been to 140 Mo shows. I'm like, 140 Mo shows? He looks like he's about 40 years old, does not have anything going for him.
So
And
he's
I'm
still
just thinking,
still a groupie at age 40.
right.
Interesting.
And like I was positing the theory of, and it's not really theory, it's more of a fact, but like not only do you get addicted to the drugs, but you get addicted to that scene, that religion in a sense, because especially if this is the only thing that is bringing you happiness in your life, this one thing, it becomes so addictive instead of working on the things around you. And it's that's a dangerous thing when you can't
Well, so look at
unassociate
it
them.
this way: there is this genuine need to feel connected to something larger, and a larger entity, a larger collective consciousness. There's nothing wrong with that, but it needs to be balanced with a sense of individual power, and the two need to be in balance. Where, as an individual, you're not harming or extracting from the greater good, but adding to the greater good, and the greater good in turn is looking out for your greater good. That's the best of all possible worlds right there. This guy, on the other hand, by being a groupie, he's simply parasitically drawing from this group event and, of course, drawing from the collective energies of the society that make him have whatever income and leisure he has to go pursuing staying high all the time rather than being a productive member of society. So
That brings up something interesting that popped in my head as you said that the balance of the individual power and the community, the collective consciousness, etc.
yeah,
And we live in a radicalized society currently in the Western world, on purpose, of course, by things we should not mention. But there's the us versus them mentality. So there's this constant focus on my individual freedom, my narcissistic freedom, and instead of the communal good, not the balance between the two. So they're taught we're all taught from a young age, and that if you have that collective thing, you lose your individual freedom. If you have that commitment to a partnership, to a mate, you lose your individual freedom. So you must have one foot out the door all the time.
yeah, I think that's perhaps a really false dichotomy. In a just society, your privacy would be respected, even while your commitment to the community is there and has to be there if you're a member of that community. And this is really where a lot of like Scandinavian socialism is based on. I remember seeing an article in National Geographic a long, long time ago, just an old issue. I was helping clear out my parents' house when they needed to downsize. So all these fascinating old issues of National Geographic, which I donated to a resale place that collects bookstores and so on. It helps the poor. And in doing it, it said Sweden, quiet workshop of the world. Now, this is Sweden in the mid-60s, okay? So here's a society where you have all this social welfare being provided, basically cradle to grave goods. But because Swedes have an innate work ethic, they are Swedes at this point. They haven't been overrun by all these people coming from the third world with their hands out, 89% of whom are going on welfare immediately on social benefits the instant they arrive in the West, and actually look for the best country to settle in based on who gives the most goodies without you having to work for it. They don't have that mentality. So those who are in need, the needs are provided for. Those who can contribute are expected to contribute and do so without the whip on their backs of communism. They're doing it out of a sense of communal good. And this is what you have when you have a cohesive society where they're pretty much one ethnic group. They're not just a human zoo of people with, competing values, competing ideas, and very different expectations of what you give and what you get from the collective greater good, the greater picture.
And it's one of those things where you can have a mishmash of people going together, and you could have common things you agree on, but it's harder. You have to have a common purpose, a common cultural goal with that, and it's that's hard to. I don't have an answer how that works, but I got on July 4th week. I was with family on my wife's side, and we got in a pretty deep discussion that normally wouldn't have at a family gathering about socialism and Marxism and basic human rights and all that type of stuff. And the question was posited: where it was, is it a basic human right to have food, shelter, and healthcare? And I said, no, I don't think it is. And now, then it's caused an argument, but not in a bad way. But anyways, the long and short of it is that what it came down to was defining what a basic human right was. And when I defined it and showed, no, what I mean is this: you should not just get something for nothing because someone else has to do it for you. So sure, if you are disabled, you broke your leg or you have both your legs amputated, are you going to build a house with your hands? Probably not. You can't lift. You're going to be probably a liability on the field. Can you do the paperwork though? Can you help? Can you go watch the kids while they're building it? Can you contribute in some other way? Yeah. If you can contribute, you contribute. That is it. Those programs are not. You shouldn't just receive it because you want to play video games and masturbate all day. Like that's that you don't deserve anything if you're not a contributing member of society, unless you can not work for some reason, like you had a stroke, you have cognitive decline, and you're hanging on. Oh, that's an understandable thing. There are programs for those people, but you do not get to choose not to work because you were lazy. You should not be able to receive. So we got to the foundation of this as to me, what a basic human right should be is if you are willing to contribute what you can, not to the point of killing yourself, but contribute what you can in a functioning first world country, you should be able to have the access to the resources to build a life, to have the basic human needs met if you contribute what you can. That would be a utopian idea, like you described in the work ethic in the Swedes in the 60s. You care about that, and you all have to have a common purpose in that community. Otherwise, there's no point.
Well, I think you hit on something, which is that if we're going to give you something that you didn't earn in some way, we have to take it from someone else who did, in fact, earn it.
Yeah.
That's how it works. So you have to have a real justification to be able to take it from A to give it to B.
Correct.
You can't just say all Bs are entitled to it, or that becomes a form of, you might say, minority privilege. We talk about privilege, no matter of entitlement, which really strains the giver, the involuntary giver, from whom it is then extracted. And it's always the power of the state, which then extracts it, whether it's through taxation or by whatever other means of redistribution is used.
Well, this gets into another point of the conversation, which I picked apart. It was, well, there's plenty of money out there from our taxes because it's being misappropriated. Yeah, we know that. It's being stolen and lining the pockets of overpaid congressional people and wasted. You're taxed 7 times on the dollar you make. It's not even real at this point. And we agree on that part. But that doesn't mean you deserve to have something for nothing. We need a restructuring of our taxation system and a restructuring of the economy. That is the thing. And you see this happening now. People are agreeing more and more on certain things because it's hitting your pockets. You're having people who cannot buy houses. You're having, because the 8% interest rate plus the interest rate is bad enough, but it's because the median income does not even remotely match the cost of a house.
Well, and again, when we try to look at causes, the explanations are weaponized. All you hear is, well, we're spending X amount on Ukraine. So if we just quit doing that and let those people become colonial subjects, those who survived the purges and the mass executions that always follow Russian occupation, then somehow we'll have enough money for everything, not realizing that the bailout of 2007, 2008, which was around, I've heard the figure 700 billion to a trillion, to bail out the financial institutions who bet on the financial casino. It was just a casino on these derivatives and other, credit default swaps and all these other fictional products, so-called financial products that led up to the collapse. Bailing them out just kicked up the national debt even further. Well, that kicks the can down the road, and the bill ends up having to be paid. So we're all paying it through higher inflation. And
you
eventually,
mean Obama
higher
didn't do a good
interest
job?
rates.
What are you talking about?
everything. And then the other thing they don't even examine is, well, we're still paying, and even during Trump's years, we were still paying the same deal that Obama worked out, giving Iran X amount of money not to develop a nuclear program, which they're proudly saying they're developing anyway. Pallets full of cash the U.S. delivered to buy their not becoming a nuclear nation, which didn't even work. So how about those billions? And then we're still, even over the last year, making, quote, environmental payments to, of all wonderful places, the People's Republic of China, as if they could care less about the environment, which clearly they do not.
As they're buying the farmland, up here.
As
next
they're
to
buying
military
U.S.
bases.
farmland.
Yeah.
And we're also supporting the narco states of Central America who are funneling people they won't allow to settle there to here. So how are we doing all this? There's money for all of that. And by contrast, what's going to, for people with their backs to the wall fighting to defend their culture, their language, their civilization, and above all, their democratic processes and their freedom, is a tiny little sliver of our GDP. The other stuff is a significant amount. This is an example of how a topic gets hijacked. And
look at climate change. What they do up in New Jersey, you have, and I don't think plastics are great. I'd like to use different things, but you had plastic straws and plastic bags banned. So you now have to buy plastic recycled bags at the store for your grocery shopping. And you always forget to bring one with you. So you got to buy new ones. There's actually more waste from this now. It's just this crazy concept. And, but people are like, no, we have to fight climate change. That's why. So as long as you take the trigger word or the trigger concept or the radical theory they're doing, you associate anything with it, you can do anything you want. You can convince someone that you should stop wiping your ass because of climate change, because toilet paper is killing the trees. I guarantee you, I could convince someone of that right now.
Well, the interesting thing is that there are actually biodegradable plastics which do break down in a certain period of time, wouldn't float around in nature forever. They're readily available. We just have to start using them and buying them, replacing polyethylene, polyurethane, and so on with these more benign plastics. So it's not a matter of plastics are all evil. We can make our plastics out of corn and soy and renewables like that. It doesn't even have to be out of oil. So we have a lot of options when it comes to plastics.
You brought up a good point before we started this episode today, and it just reaffirmed it as we're talking about this. So again, the individual versus the communal well-being.
Yeah.
So people are kind of trained nowadays to be a victim, and it's harder to unassociate, events, whether it's unresolved associations or trauma, if you feel like you're special or a victim or the individual versus the communal thought process. So
it's also a lot harder to go out and make yourself a distinctive individual through extraordinary accomplishment and real contributions to the well-being of others, as opposed to just declaring yourself important because you're a victim. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. That's a good point. But so how it applies to this, the concept of climate change and whatnot, how it's going on, is and get ready for the people saying we deny science because we study science. But you train them for the victim mentality, the opposite of mindfulness, and then you give them their community to be a part of, your community of victims. And well, you've now hit the nail on the head. You said it with the rock concert before. People have that pull for the collective, the pull here. Here's our version of the pull. Enjoy it because we control this narrative. And when you're stuck in that, you've actually given them every single piece. It's almost like they studied psychology when they did this to people. It's crazy.
Right. Well, let's give you your community that you belong to. As a matter of fact, in our seminar yesterday for healers, which I guess you had to miss, I understand, one of the things that Lori brought up was one of her clients who said, well, her group that she hangs out with, it's all work hard, play hard. So basically this woman's time, they were trying to do a swap out of service for service, was worth about 3 times what Lori's was. And it's just not the case at all. Lori does very good work, but this was being thrown out there, the work hard, play hard. So we're special. You see, we're entitled to more than the rest of you slobs because we're of this status. The rest of you are down there. It's just, so we're going to give you this group you belong to. And the real grouping you belong to should be something you earn your association should be one of like-minded individuals pulling the same way.
Yeah.
There was an old Norse term for that, which is samtak, like pulling in the same direction. And the symbol for it in Tfanic, which Tfanic was a pre-runic language of ideograms, and the ideogram is of two persons pulling on a rope together. Each one's got a side of the rope like a yoke-shaped rope pulling a burden. We can't quite see what the burden is, but sometimes it was just portrayed as a ship. It was a figure of a prow of a ship and two little stick figures with a rope connecting to the sides, so pulling together. And so that's the group you actually, in reality, should belong to functionally, where we have the same objectives. We're contributing something in a particular area by our association, not just an association of consumers.
Well, this applies to marriage too, or close, intimate relationships, whether it's friendship or whatnot, where like you have to understand that you have a common purpose, whether it's because you're raising kids together, whether you work together, whatever it is, you don't have to agree on everything, but you have to have that common purpose pulling you forward so you can check your ego at the door when things come up. Because if you start, a lot of time, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the term narcissist is thrown around to everyone nowadays. And often what a lot of people are talking about is they're labeling someone as a narcissistic personality disorder as defined by the DSM-5. The person who is purposely manipulating things around them and yada, yada, yada. But the reality is most people who are acting narcissistic don't know they're doing it. And they're not purposely doing anything. And they might have 20 aspects of their life where their ego is not involved in a negative way. But then there's one aspect they have no idea about. And maybe that's in marriage. Maybe they don't realize that like it's all about, they have to know everything going on, whether they're a know-it-all or they feel like they have to assert their dominance, and they stop pulling together at a certain point. And I mean, I encounter that all the time in difficult conversations where I go, wait a minute, is this about me? Am I making this about me, or is this about us striving forward together? And it's hard.
This may get us back to one of your favorite psychoanalysts, Erich Fromm, where he mentions the productive orientation versus the exploitative or hoarding orientation. You see, the proper character orientation is a productive one. And if you're productive, you don't need that to be distinctive. So the seeking of a false collective identity or the need to belong to a herd, period, is the lack of having created distinction for yourself in what you do, where people would know you by what you do.
Yeah.
By what you're good at, by what you actually contribute to the lives and well-being of others, to the greater good. And this could be anything. It could be you run a dry cleaners, you're extremely good at finding the customer's tickets, getting it to them. You never make a mistake. Nobody ever walks out of there with somebody else's suit coat, for example, doing a great job at whatever you're doing and providing a top quality service to whoever you're serving, that can be a form of distinction, a very honorable and proper one, and standing in your own power as one who provides that service or that good, whatever it is that you're producing, or as part of that production, You don't have to be the lead character, which I guess brings us to the person feeling the anonymity of modern life as one of a little grain of sand in the greater Gesellschaft society rather than the smaller Gemeinschaft community. The sense of feeling lost is the reason we need to find these associations, whether it's the rock concert as a form of church, a collective, basically spiritual social gathering, or whatever identity we seek, going to Burning Man, whatever the hell form it takes for people, forging an ersatz identity in the place of a real one, which has to be earned over a lifetime and earned by what you do, by your intentions and then your actions following your intentions. And I've run into so many people like this who, like their personal decisions. I was hearing from a friend the other day who says, well, I'm baking some bread while I'm working on such and such. Great. What are you making? He says, well, I'm making this, let it rise on its own, and it's in a round form in an open pan. I said, great, I make that kind of bread also. Well, as opposed to the people who make it in a pan, because if you make it in a bread pan, well, that's out of medieval monks and blah, blah. I'm going, wait a minute. Everything this guy does, it's always an either or situation. Whatever way somebody else is doing it is the wrong way, and whatever way I'm doing it is the right way. I'm going, no, it's not like that, mate. I've made bread both ways, and it's much more delicate trying to make a loaf pan. You can get a lot more things wrong as far as how much moisture, how much leavening, all of these questions, how much oil, etc., or butter, whatever you're using, tallow, whatever the heck it happens to be, to make that rise just right. You got a lot more latitude in doing that round, thinner pan bread. I've done both ways. It's much more time consuming to do that loaf. You have to a lot more things can go wrong. It can take a lot longer to cook, longer to rise, etc. But just because it's his, you see, is the one way, and that's the only way that matters. This is again, a reaction to the anonymity of modern life, of complex societies, trying to make yourself a distinction through standing up higher, even standing on somebody else's throat to stand a bit higher, and crowing about how great you are. Like the fellow who talks about being in a very complex language area. He's telling me that he's lived in East Africa for 3 years, and he mastered Swahili in 1 year. And I'm going, no, you didn't. I know people have really high aptitude for languages. It's a lot longer than that to take on a language which doesn't have anything in common with your native language, which is English and a bit of French. No, you didn't do that. Or people claim to have mastered Mandarin in 1 year. Even if you're an absolute genius, you're not doing that in a year. I'm sorry, you're just not.
Yeah.
You might become conversant, learn several phrases, learn to listen fairly well, but the complexities of such a language and the difference of intonation can be so slight. Like if I said the classical way of speaking in Old English, the, versus the modern English, the. In Mandarin, those two things would be a world difference apart. Just sha, just that much difference make a world of living. So no, you haven't learned those nuances unless you've been at a very long time. People with very high IQs living in the Far East, for example, or in a completely different culture area, learn that. Or the fellow who told me, and he's quite good at martial arts, told me that he would break 12 inches of concrete with one strike. And I'm going, okay. I've seen people who are very, very good at it, wouldn't even attempt 12 inches of concrete. Because concrete, when it sets up, is pretty formidable, you know?
Yeah.
Unless you have it chalked up just right, that's not so easy to do. But just, you know, to be good at it, I have to claim myself to have superhuman capabilities. I always try to tell such people, don't let your blue cape get caught. Don't step on it on your way out the door or out of the phone booth, wherever you're changing. You know, a reference to Superman. Was this a blue or red cape? I don't even remember.
Red cape. Blue outfit, red cape. Yeah.
All right, red cape. Yeah. Right. Don't step on your red cape out on your way out of the phone booth, you know. But it's this need to aggrandize the self as if to attain some sort of credibility, you have to aggrandize yourself. Or the idea that, well, wherever I live is the greatest spot on the planet. Everybody else should be here because I chose to be here. Well, not necessarily. Well, and at the same time, you're telling me when some friend calls in and asks you, well, I'm a 45-year-old attractive female. I'm unattached. I'm really thinking of moving somewhere where life is simpler. Should I move there? And at the same time, you're telling her about how great it is. You're saying, no, you just shouldn't move here like that because, and she's saying, well, why? Because you'd be raped. I'm going, everywhere I've ever lived, here or somewhere far away, has been a civilized place where I could tell a 45-year-old woman that she'd be fine moving there. I mean, she may or may not like this or that, maybe some part of the culture, maybe economically, maybe your job doesn't fit in. But I would never have to say to anywhere that I considered civilized or worth my living in, don't move here or you would get raped. Excuse me? You're accepting that as the norm of the society you're living in and telling me that's a preferred society? I think not. Yeah. This is the narcissist speaking. If it's mine, it must be the best because I chose it.
Well, to circle back a little bit to the person aggrandizing their own actions, whether it's breaking 12 inches of concrete or it's, embellishing a story of, I had to fight this guy off outside a bar. He was drunk, but that story turns into 3 people I fought off and whatnot. Like I know myself when I was younger, like I would make up lies. I would aggrandize because I was attention seeking. I wanted attention because The attention I got at home, let's just say, wasn't the best.
Right.
And we'll leave that there. But the need for attention, and when you especially at a young age, realize that when you aggrandize these things or you lie and you get attention, this is where the compulsive liar can change the pathological liar very quickly, especially if it's programmed as a kid. When you aggrandize and you get attention, that's the only attention you're getting, and you think that is the proper attention because that click is off in your head, versus how you said before, the person that is known for what they do. The attention they're receiving is earned attention, genuine earned attention, because on a deep level, that person, even if they're pathological lying, on the deep level, they know it's bullshit, and they know that their aggrandization has no founding. It's the same thing as when you receive something for free that someone does work for you. A contractor does a beautiful job in your house. Great, you paid for it. But when you build it yourself and you look at it, even with its imperfections, you get that deep hit of dopamine, that calming feel. And when you aggrandize a story, you get attention. Yeah, you get a dopamine hit. It's an addiction to that. And versus you earn it, you're not going to get addicted to earning something. What's the worst thing that happens? You earn more. Maybe you become a workaholic. That's not the best thing to do if you choose work and the mission over balance in your life and personal life.
Right.
Because everything can be an addiction if it's not in balance. But when you earn it, it's so much more important. It means so much more and impacts people.
Well, you quite rightly point out pathological attention seeking, the need to be the focus of attention, to need to be the special person in the room, can definitely lead to being a pathological liar or exaggerator, which amounts to the same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
I imagine they're very closely tied together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're telling me how great it is where you are, but one of your best buds who would stop by and visit with you and have dinner with you and so on, had your back, is a major cartel figure, a major drug dealer. I'm going, hang on. I don't want somebody like that as an association. I want to give just like I wouldn't give my money to that character, I wouldn't give my personal attention or my affection to that individual, even if you were very nice and polite outside of his job of what his drug distribution does to society. I wouldn't want to be part of him.
You're tying yourself in the network of that, but just energetically
giving my attention to such an individual. I wouldn't go out of my way to offend him, of course, in part just for survival, but nor would I flatter him or give him my attention or treat him as an equal because of what he does for a living. I would shun him. I would avoid him. And yet, you're telling me how great where you are is, where this is a common thing and this is okay. And government kind of looks the other way because the drugs are headed to another country and it's destroying society there.
Yeah.
No, that's, these are compromises I would not make. And if I were in a place where those compromises were every day, I wouldn't call that paradise. No, man, I wouldn't do it.
No, that makes sense.
So this is the difference between the narcissistic view of life, where I am the big I with a capital I every minute, and I need to dominate every situation. I know the way it is, versus where you're humble and quiet and you learn. And I would send you something earlier, I don't know if you found it or not, which was one of the first things I had to learn coming from America and living somewhere else for a while and being told, well, this is kind of how people are here. And by the way, guy, this is how we look at you Americans. I say, how is that? Well, you're loud, you're boisterous, and you act as though you know everything and you're here to tell everyone else what to do. I go, whoa, yeah, I have seen this. You have a point. So what's your alternative? Then I looked at it. It was called the Law of Jante, or in Finnish it'd be Lanteyak. Could you perhaps read that? Share it with us.
Yeah, I've got it right in front of me here. So the first one is, don't think you are anything special. The second one, don't think you are as good as we are. Don't think you are smarter than we are. Don't convince yourself that you are better than we are. Don't think you know more than we do. Don't think you are more important than we are. Don't think you are good at anything. Don't laugh at us. Don't think anyone cares about you. Don't think you can teach us anything. And those are powerful. I mean, because when I read those as someone who is 35 years old, raised in a narcissistic society, but I credit myself as someone who really looks at the collective good overall. But a few of those in there, I read and immediately I have a reaction of not distaste, but almost uncomfortability, as in, because just reading them at face value shows something else than what they really mean, because how you're programmed in society. So, for instance, when it says, don't think you are good at anything, my first reaction to that says, don't be proud of something you're good at. And that's not what it says. So when if you want to explain that one just as a purpose, because I think if people read these, and I'll post these on the podcast episode and on our website as well, but don't think you were good at anything. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think it simply means that I have to respect the fact that everybody's good at something. I've got my strengths and my competences. I've got a hell of a lot I'd like to learn to do better, or learn to be competent in other fields, to be certain. And I don't think I'm special because I'm, say an expert on herbal medicine or an expert on this or that I actually do for a living. That doesn't make me special. It's just one skill amongst myriad skills that we all have. I'm no more important than the upholsterer who fixed the seats on my car several years ago,
So to give these a name in modern day American society, I'd say the laws of you're not special. In very, 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 very basic terms, because how you describe that, I know that's what it means on a deep level. But when someone reads it in a society that focuses so much on the individual, it feels like an attack on them. Oh, so now you mean I just have to say I'm bad at everything? It's like, no, you can be proud of what you have earned, but don't think you should hold that over someone else.
Yes, that could be better phrased, but I think the rest of them pretty much speak for themselves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, all these are... the thing is, anyone could twist any of these words in any way they want to promote their victim mentality. So that's why I think it's funny to codify it as you're not special. I love that. It's anti-special in a sense, because it's just it's almost like putting the people who go, I don't want rules to control me, are the ones that follow the most rules about how to conduct yourself in this communal radical stuff.
Yeah.
So it's you're given that illusion of freedom because you think you're free, but you're following every rule that cult has told you to.
Yeah, that's true. I think one sociologist I heard a lecture from one time when I was in school was talking about how he tried to track the culture of a motorcycle gang and actually joined one, went through all the trappings to fit in, and concluded they actually had more rules to follow than a corporate executive to how you dress, what patch you will wear, what sort of chrome you have on your chopper, as they call it, everything about it, how many horsepower it has. I mean, it was detailed as all get out, how you would wear your hair. I mean, everything, if you varied from that, you really raised eyebrows. You were standing out in a bad way.
Yeah, I've heard that. I had a couple of friends that were involved, not any I forget what they call them, the biker gangs that like run drugs and whatnot. Even the local ones, they have a lot of rules. I had a friend that was a part of one that he specifically what they did was they were a group of bikers. They worked normal 9 to 5s, but they specifically, if there was a woman who was being abused by her husband, they would get them out. They would show up at the house and remove her from the house. And just by their presence alone, the abusive alcoholic husband would be like, nope, She can leave. Yeah, she can leave. No problem.
Yeah.
So, but even then, they had rules of conduct of their bikers, everything else. You're belonging to an organization. The question is, does your organization that you belong to promote good, equality, and happiness, or do they promote conflict, radicalization, and an us versus them mentality? Frankly,
Well, and does it promote rules for the sake of rules? I mean, whether you wear this patch or that, whether you wear a blue denim jacket or a gray denim jacket really shouldn't affect me one way or the other.
yeah.
If we're agreeing to ride together, what on earth does it matter? He's getting these minutiae of human behavior. Alexis de Tocqueville, who was a student of early America, a French observer, once wrote that he said, get 2 or 3 Americans together, they'll form a club or association.
Well, it's posits a question. What do you think on this? So, the way I see it, the more rules you have to follow, the more occupied your brain is at following the rules so you can conform to the groups. You're not ostracized by the group. So all these rules that you have to follow all the time, not 10 like this one, like hundreds of rules, societal rules, personal rules, all these things. It makes it so you're so overwhelmed. Take away, a collapsing economy and the politics and all that other stuff going on and everything else you're bombarded with. You can't think straight because you have so many rules around you. You say this one word and you trigger this group of people. You say this word and you piss off this group of people and your cancel culture and whatnot. I mean, half the things we talk about, we could get canceled for. But frankly, I did this thing a while ago where I don't care at all.
Well, you can end up occupying a lot of your mental space and your mental energy just trying to run interference with persons who are offended about nothing, looking for something to be offended about as a way of exerting power over you or manipulating or controlling you with their selective outrage, their selective victim status, self-sought victim status, you might say.
Yeah.
Versus more productive ways of thinking. And of course, it displaces creativity when you have a hyper-structured society like that. It's very hard to be creative.
Yeah.
It's very hard to see the larger, subtle associations between things, which account for so much human progress.
No, that makes total sense. And I think we're seeing a shift away from that nowadays in modern society, or at least pushed by some people. I mean, that's kind of what we're working to build. That's the whole point of this podcast and everything that we're doing to promote that.
Yes, I think to look at ancient wisdom, ancient ways that we responded to each other that were perhaps healthier than modern ways, and how we can bring that forward and update it into our present lives. I think that's one of the questions we always have to keep foremost in this podcast, and how we help people to look at the issues that we examine here.
Yeah.
What was this balance in the village mentality? And the village mentality could get very small and very minutely focused, where anything strange, anything extraordinary is potentially evil, or is a matter of witchcraft, or whatever the heck it is that they're wanting to, be afraid of the outside world with, a kind of a jingoism. Very unfortunate. Like I'm reminded that in medieval times, people would shutter their windows at night, even when it wasn't necessary for weather purposes, just because stepping outside at night, the night was ruled by these dark forces that wouldn't be a problem during the day, you see.
Right.
A lot of it was just plain old superstition,
Rub some blood on the top of the door, you're good, right?
Oh yeah, that was actually done in many societies, even in Scotland. Yeah.
Yeah. It worked though. It worked. So the firm said it's real.
Well, it probably, as kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, it probably did keep all but thieves and robbers and so on inside at night who were following superstitions. Those who rousted themselves at night probably went, oh, good. Now that they're all locked in, I can go raid this guy's barn, because they're not going to dare step outside for fear of the supernatural beings that I'm not running into. I'll go, steal his pitchfork or whatever the heck it is I want from his barn. I'll go get his churn, whatever it might be. So unfortunately, it kind of gave the night to the people with ill intentions.
Yeah.
Who then would be willing to go out. So that's the danger of that kind of xenophobic thinking. Or there's another term for it where, yeah, just creating this exclusion zone that doesn't need to be there, perhaps.
Well, I was talking the other day with my wife about the concept of the community, the village, where, you know, it's different than how our society lives currently. And it doesn't mean you're going to get along with everyone. It doesn't mean there's never going to have issues. But it's a place where you know who you live with. You trust who you live with. And you also trust that you all share a common purpose, that when things happen, you will resolve it. If this person acts in a bad way, if they rob or do something, the community will have a democratic decision and decide, can this person be a part of our community still? What did they do? What do we need to do to rehabilitate them or them make it right? Did they rob from this?
Or exclude them? You know, banishment was a common punishment in the old days. You know,
you touch someone's daughter who's a child. Banishment / death was a thing. You steal from someone, you can make it right. Maybe you were desperate. Hey, let's find out why he was desperate. What's going on? Oh, he lost his job? Okay. Hey, my buddy has a company. Come train as a contractor. We'll get you going, man. All right? Get your shit together. You know, that type of mentality community versus the, oh, that guy down there is weird. And like, how many people know their neighbors anymore?
Well, again, this gets back to, in the village, you had interdependence, economic interdependence, which can, in its way, created social interdependence. If you had a community like in today's world where everybody's on a different dole from a corporation, everybody's doing telework at home, so they don't really have a community in the same sense, because this guy's job could vanish, the corporation could go bankrupt, somebody could have floated a false stock option or whatever and destroyed it from within, while it was even a productive entity, otherwise just be sucked down by its investor caste, who are parasites mainly. So that could happen. The capital sector could torch it for reasons that have nothing to do with productivity whatsoever, just for speculation purposes. And there goes this person's job. So it's not an interdependence where I'm the miller, I'm grinding your cornmeal, or I'm grinding your flour. You're the farmer bringing me your grain to be done, and I get a percentage of it, or you pay me a certain amount for doing it. And I buy cloth for my sacks from the weaver over here, or from the textile mill 2 villages over. So it's all small scale, and we're all actually depending upon each other's productivity.
Yeah.
This is going to be very hard to reverse. But in some way, we have to try, I think, to get back to it, because it's just healthier. And we're kind of hardwired for the community, for the village. And so we go around trying to create it all the time anyway, whether it's there or not, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about this before, where you have people within the inner cities where they'll create their little cliques. And I believe the number was like 150 to 200 people was the max, like an anthropologist kind of researched and discovered that we can handle. And I love how Desmond in Human Zoo puts it, that, you know, they call the concrete jungle back in the day. How it's not a jungle, because in a jungle, you're kind of free to do these things. Within a jungle, you don't have all these issues going on. You have territory. But he reframed the concept of a city from a concrete jungle to a concrete zoo, because the behaviors that people exhibit within the cities, the rampant crime, all these different things, you don't see that in the jungle, but you do see it in the zoo with animals. You see animals doing this. It's Human Zoo.
I think you're referring to Desmond Morris's The Naked Ape, right? Yeah.
No, well, Human Zoo is the one I'm reading right now.
Zoo. Okay. Yeah.
But same author. They play off of each other. But that was just the introduction. I just started the book, and I was like, this is going to be good.
Definitely.
This is set the whole tone. I mean, you can tell this man knows how to write a thesis.
A very original thinker. And I think, as I recall, Morris is a biologist rather than an anthropologist, isn't he? I could be wrong.
Yes, I think he's a biologist. Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
But his influence comes, I mean, in his first introduction and his acknowledgments, he's naming off like 30 different professors, and he makes it known. He goes, I'm acknowledging them, not because I agree with them, but because this sparked debate and conflict, and they're included in this. And like that's
some intellectual honesty that's refreshing to see. Yeah.
And that's what we need to get back to. I think when we get back to the point, and you're seeing some people, now that the economy is getting hit, and we're going to wrap this up in a second, but now that the economy is getting hit and it's hitting everyone's pocket, people are starting to realize that, wait, even if we don't agree, we agree about this. We have a common purpose. So you're having these conversations start now much more, and those conversations alone, it's like they're deprogramming, again, not like they are, deprogramming the radical views for many people, because now they have a common purpose, that communal well-being. And that doesn't mean this is the solution, but this is a good place to go from, because we all agree, hey, without a functioning economy, we're all in a little bit of trouble, you know?
Yeah.
I think we can all agree on that.
And what can I do individually to support a more functioning economy? I think, for one thing, quit being a part of any sort of pressure group that's pressuring the collective entity, the government, to give me or my group X amount of funds, because that's got to come from somewhere else.
Yep, exactly.
I may feel privileged to get it. There may be some historic wrong that's supposed to right, but eventually everyone gets bit in the process. We parse out a little bit of this because this group's special, that group's special, this group of voting, this voting block can be bought by giving this grant or this group of funds or this subsidy. It's pushing us all into further collective bankruptcy, and we all end up paying the price through inflation. No question about it.
Yeah, I agree.
We do not escape it, and the eventual devaluation of our currency against currencies that are more based upon assets, real assets, rather than just fiat printing.
Yeah, this is where this has to change before it's too late, if it's not too late. But I like to be optimistic that there is a plan in action going on, at least something, and I want to look forward to that. So,
well, I agree. Let's end on a happy note then. Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Sir, well,
great discussion, Bryan.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for being with me today, as usual, and I hope everyone enjoyed our first video podcast that we're going to start doing. The quality will improve little by little as we navigate going from just voice to video as well. So, Georg, thank you so much for being with me tonight.
Take care, Bryan, and go with the gods.
Go with the gods. Thank you for joining us on Shamanic Voices. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, share, follow us on social media. Every click helps us with this project as we try to share with the world the customs passed down in the ancient Scandinavian tradition for over 8,000 years. We hope you enjoyed our very first video podcast today discussing the collective will versus the individual, narcissistic posturing, and the Law of Jante. Please bear with us as we navigate all the new confangled technology and editing. All this is done by myself, and it's quite a learning process. Don't forget to check out our website, Teutonichealing.com, where you can explore more about what it is that we do, contact us for a session, or send us your questions to have answered. Next episode, join us as we dive back into the cosmology, the runes, and the way of the ancient world. See you next time on Shamanic Voices. Go with the gods.